Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to House of Footy. It's your boy Ray, and I've got the pleasure of Mac joining me. Welcome, Mac.
Good evening.
On tonight's podcast, we are going to be reviewing the past weekend's Premier League matches, and we'll also preview the second round of the first leg of games of the round of 16 from the Champions League. Before we get into it, don't forget to follow us on our social media, both on X and Instagram. Our handle is at @house_of_footy. Also, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to us. We are on both Spotify and YouTube. And lastly, feel free to get in touch with us via email. We love hearing from you guys, and we want you guys getting involved. Our email is houseoffooty@hotmail.com. Let's get started in regards to the title race. One game we're going to mainly focus on: Manchester City 1, Chelsea 1. I think a big result that has repercussions on what this means for the run-in for the title race, of course, at the end of the season. A game, I'm going to be honest, and I guess I'll apologize to any of our listeners who took maybe my advice on Man City Chelsea, and I thought Man City were going to win big in this game. All signs led to that, but Chelsea did hold their own, and I guess for me, Mac, it was a good mix of Man City were not up to their standard. I think we can all agree to that, and Chelsea were just slightly better and more solid than what we would have expected them, especially with those results against Liverpool and Wolves previously in the last couple round of games where they've conceded multiple goals. So, Mac, I guess let me toss it to you first. What were your initial reactions to this result?
I'm on the same page as you, where we thought it could potentially go one way, where we initially had gone in thinking that if Chelsea were to get anything out of this game, it would have to be a high-scoring affair, considering we assumed defensively how fragile they could have been. But we did make the point where offensively they have a lot of the tools in the tool belt that could be effective against a Man City team that like to be able to, of course, play a high pressing system. And generally, when they're going to Man City, when they're going to give away chances, it's generally high quality chances, which may be easier for, let's just say, the not most prolific of front three that Chelsea do pertain, but they have the ability to expose that weakness of a Man City team. So that's what we thought going in. But of course, the difference would be is that Chelsea defense, how well they played. Of course, the center half pairing between Disasi and Caldwell were phenomenal. Disasi had the game of his life, definitely his best performance in a Chelsea shirt. Similar with Caldwell, where you look throughout the game where they're celebrating every single individual tackle or clearance or header, just the emotion and effort they put in defensively kind of was the roadmap of how successful they were, where the goalkeeper Petrovic didn't really have to make any outstanding saves, which normally speaking in this type of game against, let's say, a mid-table team facing a City team, first starts with defensive and their goalkeeper standing on their head. They didn't have that because the defense was that sound, where the only goal for Manchester City that did come through was a deflection. And it was fortunate on their end, but it was coming. And just looking at kind of the basic stats, where Chelsea at the end of the day had more shots on target than Man City in the game, where you see in that moment on the other side of the pitch where they're able to get on the break, where they're able to be able to get out and express themselves on the counter. They were at least hitting the target, asking questions of Ederson. Ederson himself had to be able to make a phenomenal double save to keep Chelsea at bay with just a 1-0 lead at that point. But they were eventually able to find their moment through Raheem Sterling from a Nicholas Jackson counter, which that was good enough to give them a platform where, like, okay, we've gotten that goal. We don't have the legs to be able to kind of keep up this relentless pressure for full 90 minutes. We'll absorb back. Maybe we get all 3 points. Hopefully we'll get at least one. They've managed to do that. So great for Chelsea, great performance. Even though it doesn't really shift them around the table, it shows against some of these bigger sides how they can still be a threat and potentially have a platform to build forward. Of course, consistency will be their difference. But for Man City, it does leave us asking a lot of questions of, okay, this is a clear template of how you can be successful against them. Can other teams implement? So overall, a fascinating game and very excited to talk about it.
So, of course, we're going to go into Man City and also the other title challengers. But first, let's talk about Chelsea. Like you mentioned there, even early on in the game, we saw a lot of chances from the break that fell to Chelsea players. I think Nicholas Jackson had one very early on in the game, smothered away by Ederson. And again, constant theme about some of these Chelsea forwards who just haven't gotten the right form or just aren't confident enough to sort of take those chances away. they did get it through Raheem Sterling, like you mentioned, and it had to be, of course, Raheem Sterling, the previous one of the previous City players on the field for Chelsea, and their formation. I guess it makes sense to sort of what we've been expecting. Enzo Fernandez and Moses Caicedo as forming the two. Defensive midfielders with Conor Gallagher in front of him, and then in front of them, and then you have a front three of Cole Palmer, Raheem Sterling, and Nicholas Jackson. Throughout the game, constant theme of them really clogging the field up and hitting City on the break. And they did get the first goal towards the end of the first half. Early in the second half as well, we did see some chances where if they were a little more clinical, could have been 2-0, and it would have been a huge mountain for City to climb. Ultimately, City did do well enough to create enough chances. Like we've had it highlighted here, over 36 chances. So I think it's 36 chances in total that they had, and so eventually something was going to give. But should we? I guess just a general question. It feels like Chelsea, as most teams would against City at the Etihad, would just drop deep. But should they have been a little bit more courageous later in that second half, considering they were finding seams in between the defense and the goalie sort of running in behind? It didn't look like Ruben Diaz and Akanji were as confident in this game. And then, of course, they were able to exploit the spaces in behind Kyle Walker and Nathan Ake. What are your thoughts on that, Mac, before we jump back into Man City?
So for Chelsea, you can go it either way, where if they of course went the route of, let's say, for the Raheem Sterling substitution for Nkunku, that's a like-for-like substitution in terms of that rotation. But once on the 70th minute, at that point, when you're at 1-1, I don't necessarily think you should be taking, let's say, a Cole Palmer off and throwing Adeweke or Mudryk on that point, because at the point you're a 1-0 up, and you only have to survive an additional 20 minutes. Yes, if you potentially throw on one of those other players, you may be able to kind of get that break. But I feel like at that moment, considering what Chelsea are, I would rather at least guarantee myself 1 point versus potentially at risk of not coming away with any, which they have done this season in similar positions and kind of let it kind of slip through their fingers, and they walk away from the game dejected. So going away at the Etihad to still consolidate and get 1 point, I think that's fair enough. So based on the rotation and the substitution that they made, it left them with no choice but to do that. And I would argue even the options off the bench after Nkunku, how confident are you realistically that even if they do get that moment, they're going to be able to take it away? I have questions about that. So even though I think from an enjoyment factor, from a third party as a neutral watching this game, it would have made it a little bit more exciting. I agree with Pochettino's kind of thought process of how to be able to go about it. As well, like I said, their best chance, realistically, even though like they had a couple of opportunities in the first half, considering the quality of the players they have, no discredit, they played well at different aspects of the game. Like Jackson in that moment should have put that away. He had 2 or 3 different opportunities. Sterling as well, he had 2 or 3 different opportunities. Same thing happened where at least he was able to put away one. That is, I would argue right now, the most you can expect of these types of players until they can build up confidence to be more consistent and be more clinical. So this is a good stepping stone. So I think this was good enough. So I'm happy with Chelsea's decision. I'm happy with Pochettino moving in that manner. And I think that, like I said, this is a good platform where, okay, hey, we picked up a point away at Chelsea. We're able to find moments to be able to express ourselves and do well. Okay, what can we do against the other teams that are around us or below us around the table to build up that consistency? And then at that point, you can go into these games, hey, we've gotten ourselves a cushion of building up these amount of points and we do have the confidence in our players to be able to go at them. Then at that moment, maybe they make a different decision. So overall, I agree at the end of the day. But of course, it would have been a little bit more enjoyable, selfishly, if they did try to go for it, right? I think you were screaming in our chat, like, Mudryk winner? What are we talking about? You can envision the pace on the counter attack, but of course, I don't think it was in the cards. Before we do leave off Chelsea, I do want to be able to kind of pay special attention because you're looking at, we talked about the Chelsea defense. This midfield three of Gallagher, Fernandez, and Caicedo, it seems like it's coming into its own in this individual game. If you look at both Caicedo and Fernandez as just a duo of defensive mid, they had a total of 8 shots blocked throughout the game. So just as well as the defense kind of consolidating there, they themselves are very, very tight, very much performing as a unit defensively. I have questions about how well they can fit as a trio offensively against the other teams. That's for a later date, but you want to be able to give them flowers for today, because without their kind of work rate, without Gallagher having a clear game plan the entire game to follow around Rodri, I don't think they would have come away with at least a point out of this game. So again, in terms of, let's say, 11 that started for the game, how they set out as a game plan, very successful, but it at least put me, as of right now, it's put questions at bay about their future and how successful they can be. But again, it's a good stepping point.
Of course, their next fixture will be in the EFL Cup final against Liverpool this upcoming Sunday. So great performance to sort of gather themselves going into that fixture. But let's move on to Man City, of course. Like I mentioned, it's actually 31 shots in total that they had. Haaland had a couple, should have put them away. Questions are, of course, arising now. Hey, is there something going wrong with City? They looked, of course, credit to Chelsea for how well defensively they played, but there's concerns about Kevin De Bruyne. Was he able to create enough given how compact the Chelsea team was? Bernardo Silva was called on to come back, and I'm on as a substitute to try to change the game, even though he did pull up with an injury midweek against Copenhagen. Phil Foden wasn't as good as he's been in previous weeks. So there's concerns about, I think, it's at least starting concerns about how well their system has been working so far in certain games in the Premier League. Mac, do you have anything to say as to what's going wrong there regarding City?
So it's interesting because I know it's going to sound a little backwards of how we previously talked about this Man City team, and something that maybe I've highlighted in a couple of our podcasts, where this team isn't as deep or has the rotational options to be able to adjust their system midway through the game as they historically done. If you look at their bench going into the game, you're talking about John Stones, Kovacic, Bernardo Silva, Sergio Gomez, Mateus Nunes, Oscar Bob, Rico Lewis, and Sissoko. For me, again, that's not the rotations offensively, where you're actually going to be able to, okay, if this doesn't go to plan, this is a rotation we can make, other than, of course, the Bernardo Silva change. And even when you're looking at a player like, and we've talked about separately, like Jeremy Doku, where if he's facing a wide back that's below the age of 30 and has a little bit of pace, he doesn't cook. It's not his game, right? And you would have noticed maybe a player like Jack Grealish, or a different previous years, maybe a Riyad Mahrez, or a player like that has the ability, okay, if we make this one adjustment, we're maybe going to be able to expose a certain part of a different team to create different opportunities. They don't have that, I feel like, where that versatility, it's not really available. The way that they can get through it, of course, is by sheer brute force. When you're talking about a player like Haaland, who on this day, it was eerily similar to his debut in the Community Shield against Liverpool last year, I think it was. No, was it last year?
Yeah, last year.
Last year. And you notice he scuffed a lot of chances, and it kind of just wasn't going for him. And that seemed to be very much emblematic of what happened in this individual matchup, where he had quite a few opportunities. In all likelihood, most days he bags at least one of them. And that's at least one of them. In all likelihood, he could probably score 2 or 3. That's very much his norm. So they have the brute force to be able to push through. But the question was, if that doesn't work, do they have a different gear? And as of right now, I don't see that from this team. And it looks like as injuries are piling up, the options are thinning it out, where that, like I said, that versatility, those options are becoming fewer and fewer. So, they're still the threat. They're still the favorite. They play when this podcast is released, the day of that it being released. They're playing Brentford. If they win, they go back up into second place. Probably are in a decent position in terms of goal difference. So they're not, of course, out of it by any means. Definitely, I would still argue the favorite. But again, there is a, let's say, an Achilles heel of this team that is starting to appear, and other teams may be able to continue to take advantage of. Or if they continue to get injured, that heel is just going to grow. That injury area that other teams can expose is just going to grow bigger.
Yeah, I'm interested because, like you said, their offensive reinforcement it looks like it's lacking compared to previous seasons, and it looks like for Pep it's plan A, and really that's it. There's no real other way other than adding more, as most teams would do if they need a goal, just add more attackers and hopefully throw something in the box and make something happen. they did get that through Rodri this game, but I'm not certain that's sort of what Pep Guardiola would want going forward for every other game this season. Though they did still get a goal back, and I think Holland, it's fair to say, he will come out and bag his fair share of goals for the rest of the season. It's just in these types of games where if nothing is really working for them, other than Kevin De Bruyne, who will get his touches, will get his chances, will set up players. Can they take that next step? So, and that's interesting because, of course, like you said, so currently on third, but they do play Brentford on the day of that this podcast will be coming out. So could easily go back into second in 56 with 56 points, making them no longer having sort of that game in hand advantage, but still very much on the back of Liverpool and above Arsenal. Which it's interesting because in previous seasons I would expected Pep to have more of a secret weapon or secret backhanded card that he can play. Whereas I feel like this season, because he does have to go up against Liverpool and Arsenal, and other teams are sort of slowly figuring out how to defend against his team. I'm interested to see how he'll change things around, but we'll keep an eye out for that. And with that being said, though, let's talk about the other teams that are in title race. Arsenal won 5-0 against Burnley, and Liverpool beat Brentford 4-1. Of course, big result for Arsenal in terms of goal difference there against the Burnley team, who's just unfortunately looks like they are pretty much out of it. And for Arsenal, of course, a number of different goal scorers. For Liverpool, again, the win, but some injuries at the expense of that win. What have we learned from sort of this weekend's results regarding the title race, apart from City, Mac?
I think, again, the main win, of course, aside from the 3 points, is that goal difference. Because that goal difference, if you have a heavier lead than the other teams, it feels like an extra point that you have against them. And that's going to potentially be, at the end of the season, vital. So by both these teams picking up heavy results, increasing their goal difference as kind of them putting back into contention. It's like, oh, we're not just fighting for points, we're fighting for goals. And you have to have that relentless attitude going into these games. So I feel like both these teams have shown that. Arsenal, we asked a lot of questions going into January. Do they need a striker? Since the new year, I think they've won every single one of their games. And in the Premier League, across 5 games, I think they scored 21 goals. I think that's the record, which is quite a large number. And Liverpool are not too shabby themselves, aside from the Arsenal result. They've heavily put on the goal threat as well. So both these teams know that they have to be able to do that consistently. So as they're competing against each other, because at the end of the day, that may be the difference on who wins the title at the end of the season. I think the interesting point, which you brought up, is going to be, and what we will also learn from Man City, a side factor that not many people talk about going into these title races are the injuries. It seems like seems like luck is ever favoring Arsenal at that moment, where they haven't had, I would say, as many consistent absences. Yes, you talked about maybe like Urian Timber, as missed sometimes, Zinchenko's always hurt, stuff like that. But it hasn't been to the degree that these other teams have experienced. And that may also be a separator, because as these claims are coming fast and furious for these teams, Liverpool are in quite a few more competitions still have to play quite a few more games. Man City still have to play a makeup game. That may be another deciding factor. So I think that's an interesting part. Great for Liverpool to pick up the points, but the injury concern is there, whilst Arsenal seem to get over the line with a clean bill of health, which for them, because that depth of squad, as you knock down, as you play these bigger teams, may be another factor. So that's my takeaway from these two teams. Great performance, great result, get the goal difference. The Liverpool injuries and also the Man City injuries are giving me a little bit concerns of how well they can be.
Yeah, of course, it's going to come down to every result, the Chelsea one included, just makes it more exciting to see how this ends. But just quickly on the Arsenal side, QER starts at left back and plays the full game again. And it looks like you said, Zinchenko hasn't been part of the squad recently, and Arsenal winning by such a big margin that they're able to bring on Cedric Soares in these types of games. So that's no disrespect to Burnley, but that's how well Arsenal have been playing so far. Kai Havertz with his goal as well. And on the flip side, Liverpool did get Mohamed Salah back. That is critical, but at the same time, lose Diego Jota, who looks like will be out for likely an extended period of time. For Curtis Jones and Darwin Nunez, they will also likely miss a short stint, but not certain how that will look. And of course, still have Trent Alexander-Arnold still having to come back. So we'll see what that looks like, especially with the EFL Cup final, which we'll preview probably in the next podcast in more detail. So exciting to say the least. And we'll of course keep you guys updated on what we're seeing. But here we'll take a quick break, Mac, and then we'll be back covering the top 4 or top 5 race for the rest of the season. So stay with us, guys. Welcome back to House of Footy, guys. We are going to continue our podcast now discussing the race for the 4th and 5th places in the Premier League that would qualify for the Champions League potentially next season. First game we're going to cover now is Wolves 2, Spurs 1. A game where this result throws everything, again, very much like the Chelsea-Man City result throws the title race into chaos. This result also throws the top 4, top 5 race into chaos, Mac, because Spurs were expected to win this game at home against Wolves. Definitely had their fair share of chances, but ultimately 2 sucker punches from João Gomes on behalf of Wolves really put it away for Spurs, who it looks like goals have slowly dried out. What are your takes from this result, Mac?
Going into this game, it was very interesting because if you look at, I would argue, the bottom half of the table, I know we're going to also maybe bring up Chelsea. Are they part of the bottom half? Not really. They're 10th. Wolves are probably the best team of that bottom half. And of course, makes sense. They're sitting 11th, right? They have a lot of quality in their team, and Gary O'Neill as the manager does a great job. But Tottenham, if they want to be able to be kind of locked in on that 4th slot, this is a must-have, must-win game for them. Fortunately, we weren't able to pull it out. And I think the question would be is, I understand James Maddison just returned from injury, but they had a lot of possession, but they created the exact same amount of chances realistically in terms of total shots as Wolves. There wasn't too much variance between there, similar to what we talked about with the Man City Chelsea, where Wolves were very defensive. The midfield job between, I think it was Lamina and João Gomes, between the two of them, they were very effective in kind of clogging up space, denying the middle for this Tottenham team. And then, of course, as long as they were able to double up out wide against the Tottenham wingers, which they were able to do because both wingers of themselves for Wolves were very withdrawn and full back, Tottenham couldn't break them down. They were clinical in their moments for Wolves when they were able to get out on the counter-attack, cause pressure. Nothing more highlighted than the stereotypical counter goal from Pedro Neto, teeing up that run going across the entire pitch, no one really falling for whatever reason. So in those moments, Spurs have to be better because they struggled so mightily to be able to break this team down, where the break between the lines, that James Maddison, that Kulusevski position, potentially kind of dropping into those pockets, they weren't good enough, in my opinion, where they weren't able to get on the turn and kind of break them down. Whereas it kind of, as long as Wolves were able to do their job defensively and hit them on the counter, which they did, they were able to get some joy. The question for me, and we're going to look at the Spurs team, is defensively. Because you understand you're going to have the ball, you're going to have possession, but at some points, it just, you get the feeling, and I understand it's more maybe of a culture, maybe of a mindset, attitude that Postecoglou puts in for his players, where they want to go all out, even defensively in a lot of ways, but it leaves them so vulnerable, where I think over the last 9 games, they haven't had a clean sheet at home, right? Where you generally speaking would think that, okay, at the very least, if we can kind of keep them out at a consistent level, every other game, hopefully get a clean sheet, we're going to be in a good position in the table. But they haven't done that. And you may say that's due to injuries, but a lot of their players are back. So again, even when they weren't able to create enough offensively, but I felt like they still gave themselves so many vulnerabilities defensively, and that's how Wolves were, and where Tottenham failed, in my opinion, in both areas of that pitch. What about you? How did you feel about this game?
Yeah, I have to go and agree with you with regards to how easily they were undone by both goals. The first one coming from a set piece. Again, I hate to keep harping on this, but conceding from a set piece corner at this level, it's unacceptable. But of course, things happen, and Spurs were able to bring one back. Kulusevski with a really nice finish, actually, right after the start of the second half, which brought things level. But again, from an offensive corner, having the ball lost in the opposition box and then conceding from that probably less than 10 seconds after that. Not the greatest look. And with regards to injuries and sort of the personnel there, I thought Ben Davies was done for, but he's come back. Very much like that Ian Wright meme when he finds out a previous teacher of his is still alive. Came back, seen him in the middle of that pitch playing as an inverted fullback, brought tears into my eyes because it's not something I never really thought would happen again. But it just goes to show. I mean, Udogie has had a fantastic season, and I think he, of course, if he was in that position, I think he would have been offering something much more. I'm interested to see what that will look like now, though, for Spurs, who left it late to beat Brighton in the last game. And again, goals haven't been flying as freely as against the beginning of the season. Heung-min Son come back from the Asian Games, and he did perform well in the Brighton game, but really looked isolated in this game against Wolves. The way they were able to sort of pack the midfield and really force the players out wide to isolate them and not really give them much chance. Credit to them, but Son and then Brennan Johnson came on for Spurs in the second half to play wide on that right hand side, leading Kulusevski and James Maddison to sort of 2 10s. That's interesting to me to see what they'll do if it's against quote unquote smaller teams or teams that are lower in the table, if that's something that they use more often. Just the creativity of those two to help supplement Richarlison and his unfortunate lack of goals in the last couple of weeks. Because previous seasons, you would have Kane, he would bag a couple of goals for you from out of nowhere, and they seriously need that if they're looking to continue that top four push. Because, of course, the next game we're going to cover now is Man U 2, Luton 1. Man U were able to get the win. 2 early goals in a game that looked like it was going to be wraps before. I think it was even before the 10-minute mark. But Luton came out to their own and really pushed them all the way to the end to unfortunately not get the win, but expose some vulnerabilities from that Man U side. What are your takes from that game, Mac?
I have to think that Manchester United have some sort of lucky charm or, some leprechaun system going on, because when you look at their performance and you compare the results, they picked up the 16 out of the possible 21 points over the course of the last 7 games. They've won 4 games straight on the bounce. I think Højlund is now, I think it's 6 games in a row he scored, which is the record for that young of a player to score that many goals in consecutive games in the Premier League. So you look at that, be like, they must be flying when you're looking at them play. They must be doing phenomenally well. No, when I'm watching this game, I'm shocked at how Luton's not able to kind of pull it off, because there were countless opportunities where they could have kind of either tied the game, potentially even taken a lead. At the same time, they're on the other side of the table. Manchester United, for example, their first goal was literally a hand wrap present from Luton. So, and they themselves, of course, like Garnacho had a breakaway at one point, wasn't able to finish it off. I think, as you even highlighted when we were playing together pro clubs, and there was a big block. Who did you yell at again? It was the Arsenal. Yeah, Lokonga.
Former Arsenal player.
Exactly. Pulling off a block like that. So it seems like the rub of the green goes in their favor, where just like if you, as an example, if you flip a coin 10 times, if you get it 6 on heads, you win. Somehow they always get 6. They always get just enough luck to be able to get by. I don't know necessarily if that's process, if that's credit. Again, they are confounding teams to me when you look at how they play, how they structure out, where they're able to get the win. Maybe I'm missing something, but I'm very curious to see if this run continues. But as it does, the fact that they're able to still win games when they're not playing so well is a credit to them in a lot of ways. They're able to kind of climb up the table, get into only 3 points away from Tottenham and 5 points away from Aston Villa in terms of the time we're recording. So they're as I think I said last podcast, the doors creeped open. They're just, again, based off results around them again, doors slightly opening a little bit more for them to get into the European competition, and either Europa League or Champions League. So wait and see for them. Again, I'm curious to see if it continues. They faced a team that struggled thus far this year. So when they start to face the better teams, their next matchups against Fulham, we'll see if this is real or not as they go against these, I'll say, better teams that they have to face in the near future.
Yeah, I mean, quick word on Luton, of course. Very happy to see them be so enthralled in the game. Where, of course, they're chasing Man United at home. If you looked at it early in the season, every one of those fans would have been excited to watch that game. And the fact that it came so close to them tying it at multiple occasions, just very happy that they were able to experience that. No disrespect to them, but I think Man U going into the game would have looked at this fixture and would have put it down as a win. They did get away with the win, but I'm like you said, Mike. I'm scratching my head because 4 wins in a row. Hojlund looking like he's now coming to form, but goal difference is one, the same as Chelsea, and they have fewer goals scored. So again, everything is falling for them in place, but I'm not sure how that's going to continue because of course Casemiro easily could have been sent off in this game. Luke Shaw goes off with an injury. Harry Maguire is replaced by Johnny Evans. Lindelof comes on as a left back. Amrabat comes on late in the game for Hojlund. It's just, I think Ten Hag, every single time he starts a game, he's like, okay, guys, this is the game plan. Something happens, and then he just reverts back to, okay, McTominay here to put out the fire. Lindelof, Johnny Evans, Amrabat, please just keep us in the game and put it over the line. So I guess credit to them, but I'm very interested to see what they'll do, like you said, in the next game, which is against Fulham, who are 12th in the Premier League. A team that you could argue could be a little bit higher. So I'm interested to see that. Mac, you had something else as well?
Yes, I think if we look at I looked at their last couple of games, how well they've done, how many points they've been able to pick up. I think this next 5, we're going to know, is a team going to kind of, they have the runway in front of them to leapfrog these other teams, because I would argue they still have a favorable fixture list before it gets dreadful for them at the end of the season. They face Fulham at home, away at the Etihad. That's probably a loss. Cards on the table. But the next 3 in a row is at home to Everton, at home to Sheffield United, and then away at Brentford. I would argue, if you're a serious team looking to be able to finish that 4th spot, that's 4 out of 5 wins right there. That should be realistically 15 points on the table. 12 points on the table for them. If they get anything away at Man City, great. But aside from that, that should be good for them, because then afterwards it starts to get difficult when they've had to face. I know they're still not that good right now, but the Chelseas, the Liverpools, the Arsenals, the Newcastles, they still have a lot of tough games on their schedule. So I think these next 5, if we just look at the next 5 chunk, if they drop some points against these other bottom feeder teams, then of course we're going to see them fall away from the table, down the table. But they should comfortably win 4 of the next 5. And then that will put them in a position. And I think we'll know by then, okay, are they eligible for it, or are they still going to be in that 6, 7, 8 range?
I love how you say comfortably win against these next couple teams, but we'll definitely have to wait and see because, of course, they're chasing Aston Villa, who did beat Fulham 2-1 to sort of create a little bit of gap between themselves and Spurs and Man U now on 49 points and occupying that 4th spot currently. Anything interesting from this 2-1 result from Aston Villa and Fulham, Mac?
It just seems like more recently this Aston Villa team has been consistently inconsistent. It's been tie, loss, win, right? Their recent run of form. So they haven't kind of hit the full rate kind of ground running. And the other one that they picked up against in that run of fixture was against Sheffield United, which everyone's picking up a 5-0 win at this moment, right? So I still have a lot of questions about them where since the turn of the year, had they been found out? I'm curious to see if this kind of run continues. The Fulham side right now, there are decent team. They're very much kind of like the Wolves conversation that we had earlier, where they're probably one of the more competitive bottom half teams, but you should edge out if you are the better team, which they did, which was good enough on the day. I think that similar to Manchester United, if you're looking at the run of form for Aston Villa, the next matchup is against Nottingham Forest. So is this was the last couple of games a blip? Similar to Arsenal towards the end of the new year where they picked up 2 losses in a row. Is this just a bad run of form? And are they going to go back onto a previous run, which they did towards the end of last year and the beginning of the year throughout the season? Maybe. We'll have to wait and see. But I'm still have a lot of questions because I think that similar to their system last year that they employed, I think they have been a little bit found out about how can you kind of isolate the key players, get behind their fullbacks offensively, if we can be able just to deny certain spaces, and cover enough centrally, because their wingbacks really aren't the threat offensively that we should be worried about. Are they going to have to make, is Unai Emery going to make another evolution of his team similar? I know it's tough to compare managers to Pep, but as Pep would do, is like there's another kind of gear that no one's expecting. This is going to be the differentiator for us. I don't know if they have that at squad, and Unai Emery, through his managerial career, is always good at that first part, hasn't been as good at second part. So we'll have to wait and see. So again, great result. Good for them to be able to pick up. Makes the the top four race even more exciting for them to be able to pick up these points. But I'm a little bit, for me, I think some people may be surprised listening to this. I have more questions about them than I do for Spurs, as an example, because I don't know if they have it versus Spurs. I know on their day can beat any team with just their goal power that they have, with their kind of enthusiasm, with their play style, versus the Seville team. Because it's so procedural, because they're so structured, I'm curious to see if they have kind of that ability to be that consistent threat that they were at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, if they do have Ollie Watkins scoring those 2 goals, and on that form, I think they do have every chance to. But I do agree with that point, Mac. First, of course, I have to mention Ollie Watkins. Fantastic finishes on both goals, very well taken. But again, the way that they were even first placed in the league at a point in this season, going away to Fulham, and season where Fulham are on a little bit of a down form. They're not a team that will possess them. I'll possess the other team. Possession stats were very similar, and they weren't able to create more chances than Fulham in this game. So I'm interested to see what will happen, because of course, Unai Emery, what he'll give you is very good solid foundation defensively, and then with sort of enough quality from build-up play, get a chance from there. And of course, if you have a red hot form and Ollie Watkins, he'll get you over the line. But considering the goal that they did against Fulham from Muniz, not great defensively either. So again, that consistency is something that we'll have to question and see how they do. But credit to them, they're currently in 4th place, so that keeps them in a good spot at the moment. And of course, that is the spot they want to go into, that they want to finish in, so that they can go into the Champions League, which was actually now what we're going to be covering in the rest of our podcast. And of course, the next couple games, PSV versus Borussia Dortmund, Porto versus Arsenal. But I think the more interesting ones are Inter Milan against Atletico Madrid. And now, so I'll dive straight into it. Inter Milan versus Atletico Madrid. Both teams, Inter and Atletico, won heavily in their respective leagues. 4-0 for Inter Milan and 5-0 for Atletico Madrid. This one has a very, very interesting matchup for me, because I think it's a game where a lot of people will just look at, yes, these two teams are seasoned Champions League teams, and so they'll give you a decent tie. But I feel like this fixture could be a very low scoring 1-0 Atletico Madrid, Diego Simeone masterclass, or it could go the opposite way and give us something of the sort of Chelsea, Man City 4-4 at the Stamford Bridge earlier this season, where it's just two players that are the most informed in world football, I would argue, in Lautaro Martinez and Antoine Griezmann. If they pop off and the players around them are able to supplement them with enough goal-scoring chances, it could be a very, very tasty matchup. So right now, I'm just not sure which way it's leaning at the moment. Inter were, of course, finalists last season, so I'll slightly give them the edge. But anything could happen in this fixture, Max. So I'm excited for this one. Do you have anything to add to this fixture or any of the other fixtures taking place this midweek for the Champions League?
So I want to be able to separate and kind of isolate 2 different teams out of this group of 8 that we were looking at having games this week. And both would be the Inter Milan and the Arsenal. Here's the reason why. Is if you look at what we anticipated going into the season, who would the favorites be for the Champions League? We talked about Man City, Real Madrid, and Bayern. I would argue, considering how Real Madrid have been kind of decimated with injuries and they haven't played as great recently, as well as Bayern, kind of the hiccups they're having at the moment, they both are still threats and in that conversation. But I would argue with the way that Arsenal are on the run of form right now, and Inter Milan their run of form, having only lost one domestic game thus far this season, having the leading goal scorer, I think, in Serie A with 20 goals with Lautaro Martinez, as you talked about. That team is as complete as it can be. And if you look across their roster, across their team, they're all in the prime of their career and have experience playing in the Champions League. So I think those two teams have gone into that same realm of the Real Madrid and Bayern, where of those four, could any one of them potentially face that Man City team in a final or potentially knock them out? I would argue yes. So I'm very, very excited to see how those matchups go. Of course, with the Arsenal, they should be quite heavily favored, so not necessarily to talk about that. But that Inter Milan one, I think this is a great test for them, where thus far this season in Serie A, hasn't been really competitive for them. Let's be honest. I think they're 9 points up on the title right now, so they should be able to kind of hold on to that comfortably. The question would be, can we add silverware in the Champions League, what they weren't able to do last year? And I think even though they have lost their goalkeeper, Onana, Jan Sommer is a fantastic replacement. He starts, of course, for Switzerland, so in terms of international competition. So they're very experienced there. They know what they're doing. They've been there. They've done it. So I think they should edge out this Atletico Madrid team. But I do agree with you. This is probably those, I'll say, biting matchup that you can have faced, where, again, if you were like you and were to bet, definitely the over and the yellow cards. Both these teams know how to win ugly and dirty. So again, I lead a little bit more Inter Milan in this matchup. I'm very excited to see how they play. And I think they are a threat to walk away with the trophy at the end of the season. To flip over to the Napoli-Barca, just to be able to highlight them, I would argue this may be the most inconsequential matchup, because if you look at those teams, they're in such drastic transition. Napoli are not going to be in Champions League next year in all likelihood. Barca will, but they'll be under new management with Xavi, and Napoli is going to have rotation of players in all likelihood, and Barca will have to figure out what they are doing financially going into next season, because they still have a lot of questions. So I think it's important for both these teams to come out with the win and make it away, because the further they make it into the Champions League, for Barca, money. Napoli, it's to stay relevant in a competition and hopefully keep your best players. And the further they go into this competition for either one of those groups, the more likely those situations are more easily resolved or easily kind of accomplished. So I enjoy this matchup. I don't think either of them are close to that threat of level as what we talked about, but on their day have the quality across their team to cause a threat to any other team in this competition. But they haven't shown it this year. Still a lot of questions, but I think it's vitally important for both of these teams to make it further. And I think that if either one of these teams when one of these teams lose, it immediately applies tremendous amount of pressure on the club as a whole, and there's going to be a lot of scrutiny. So overall, I'm very, very interested in this matchup as well, for more reasons, like I say, outside the pitch than on the pitch in some ways.
I agree. It's kind of like they're delaying the backlash that they're going to get eventually when they get knocked out of this year's Champions League. I do slightly favor Barcelona in this occasion. Napoli failed to win in the last two games in Serie A. Osimhen is a doubt for this matchup, so Barca, that's a huge benefit to them, because Napoli barely scraped by to get a tie in their last game out, whereas Barca did get a win against Celta Vigo 2-1, but haven't really been convincing. So the fact that they do have a lot of experience on their team, I think they'll edge them slightly if Osimhen doesn't start, because if Osimhen does start or play a part in this game, I think it's going to be very difficult for the Barcelona backline to have to deal with him. So we'll see what that means. But guys, this concludes our podcast for today. If you guys like what you heard, please like and subscribe to us on our social media. That's at @house_of_footy. If you have any comments, suggestions, or general banter, get in touch with us via email as well. houseoffooty@hotmail.com is our email. The next time you hear from us will be Thursday, when we review the midweek Champions League games, and we'll also preview the upcoming action from next weekend. But until then, thank you, Matt, for joining us.
Peace out.
See you guys soon.